Communication is talked about a lot in leadership, and it's easier said than done, but you've got to keep working on the communication, and it can't all just be one way, because otherwise, organisations become tone deaf. They believe in their strategy and they communicate that out, but if they're not listening to their customers or their team or their suppliers and getting feedback the other way, you can't calibrate.
Welcome to Evolve TV, Roads to Success, a special career series by Mechanic.com.au. In each episode, we sit down with inspiring people across the automotive industry to explore the real stories behind their career journeys, from humble beginnings to leadership and everything in between. This series is part of the Gear Up Auto Careers initiative, created to help young people and career changers see what's possible in the automotive world through the experiences of those who have lived it. Today's guest is someone whose journey really captures what Roads to Success is all about. Wayne Bryant started out as a delivery driver at Repco more than 30 years ago. Today, he's the Chief Executive Officer of GPC Asia Pacific's Automotive Division, leading some of the most recognisable brands in the automotive industry. In this conversation, we talk about career growth, leadership, resilience, and what it takes to build a meaningful career in the automotive world from the ground up. Welcome to the show, Wayne.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Now, CEO of GPC Asia Pacific's Automotive Division, that's a bit of a mouthful. What kind of brands might I know?
Yeah, I might try and simplify it a bit for you. Most people will know Repco. That's the most recognisable brand in the industry. Been around for 102 years, and I'm lucky enough today to be the leader of the Repco business in Australia and New Zealand. But we've got a number of other businesses as well. Napa Auto Parts is well known to many in the trade. We've got Rare Spares, a restoration business, a number of others, and one of them being a motorcycle business that people know called AMX Superstores.
So anything to do with movement or motion by the sounds of it, GPC's involved.
Yeah, well, if you're into vehicles one way or another, we've got you covered.
Fantastic. So started out as a delivery driver, now the CEO. You were once a jockey. So tell me a bit about how it started, if we wind the clock right back.
Yeah, it's a fair departure from being a jockey to in the auto parts game, but I was a fourth generation racing person. I grew up around horses, pony club as a kid, always wanted to be a jockey. That's what I aspired to be. Had a lot of success. It was fairly short-lived though. It only lasted for 5 years because I had weight trouble. I grew out of that game and I needed to pivot. So at the age of 19 or 20, I decided that I needed a new career. Through a family contact, I applied for a couple of roles at Repco. I got rejected at the first one and I got the second one and I was given an opportunity there. And all I really knew was that Repco was a big company and it probably offered a lot of career prospects for people that wanted to get in and have a go. And that's where it all started for me.
So it kind of just came along and landed in your lap and you grabbed it with both hands and...
Yeah, more or less. As I said, a family friend of ours, he worked at Repco at the time. He arranged to get me an interview. That's where the help sort of stopped. I needed to make my own way from there. A guy called Leo Cam, who was a branch manager in Repco Toowoomba. He was a bit of a legend in Repco. I didn't know that at the time.
That's not Rod Cam's.
Also the father of Rod Cam.
Yep.
Rod Cam's the CEO of the MTAQ and an interim CEO of MTAA at the moment. So Rod and I are probably a similar vintage, I think. And it was his dad that gave me a shot. And I didn't know the difference between a split plin or a ball joint at the time. All I knew was that if I gave it a red hot crack, I wouldn't let him down. And that's more or less what I told him in the interview process, that I wouldn't let him down. And I was thankful he gave me a chance.
So you made that commitment in the beginning, but is it fair to say you weren't a car guy?
No, not at all. I mean, I really like cars today, but I'm not what you'd call a red hot car enthusiast. I like to drive a nice car, keep it clean, have a few perks in it. I enjoy motor racing as a spectator, but I'm not involved in it beyond that.
Wow. And so you were a delivery driver in Toowoomba, I think it was?
That's right.
Tell me a little bit about what it was like starting in that role.
Well, first day or two on the job, he actually threw me into putting stock away so that I actually learned a little bit about the different parts that we had, and very quickly went in to become a delivery driver. I think I drove around in a Nissan 720 Ute. Wow. Back in the day. I think that was a model in those days. And I probably spent my first 4 or 5 months of my career as a delivery driver. And then Leo, through different opportunities, emerged in the store, and Leo gave me a shot on the phones. And that was a really rapid learning curve, because here I was, this ex-jockey, and now I was a parts interpreter within sort of 4 or 5 months. And Luckily, I was working with a lot of really experienced parts interpreters, terrific sales reps, and they gave me a lot of training and support. And you really learnt the craft from those guys, and actually taking catalogues home at night time and reading them from front to back, because you soon learnt that all the information you need to know about interpreting the part was within the hard copy catalogue anyway. You just needed to know where to look.
So you did that off your own back to put in the extra mile?
I got a prompt or two from Leo. He gave me a lot of guidance and, suggested different catalogues that I'd take home. And, one of the first ones I took home was a Munro catalogue, trying to work out, a pin on one end and an eye on the other, and the length of the shock absorber when it's extended or compressed, and the different gases that they used in the shocks. I learnt all that so that when a customer called up and said they wanted a GT gas shock absorber, I knew the difference between that and a touring gas shock, simply because I'd read the catalogue.
You talk the talk.
Yeah, well, you needed to be able to listen to what the customer wanted and quickly convert that into an order and get them off the phone and back fixing a car and not tying them up with silly questions. And the best way to do that was to read the manufacturer's catalogue or go to training clinics that the manufacturers were providing us at the time.
Was there a moment where you realised you actually enjoy this work?
Look, I think it started with the people I was working with. I enjoyed the company of the people that I was with. I pretty quickly worked out that there was a career path opportunity within a company like Repco, that I didn't need to be a delivery driver for the rest of my life. And I was a pretty driven, motivated individual, being involved in sport, probably hardwired a competitive streak in me from a very young age that drove me to have a desire to want to grow. And I could see that opportunity existed within Repco. So I didn't have deep parts knowledge, so I couldn't rely on that to get me all the way there. But I knew that if I treated people well, I kept my commitments, I did what I said I was going to do, and got along well with customers, that'd probably take me a fair way. So I enjoyed the camaraderie of the people I worked with. I enjoyed dealing with customers. I liked solving their problems for them. And I actually probably got a bit of a buzz out of solving those problems and making a sale. So that was sort of played to my competitive streak just a little bit as well.
So what kind of roles did you go into from the parts interpreting? Talk about a couple of steps. What are the pathways within Repco, and what were they back then?
Well, as I was promoted 2 or 3 times within the first 12 months. So off the road as a driver, into the parts room. We just opened a brand new branch out at a town called Roma, which was 4 hours west of Toowoomba. The role had been advertised for sales rep. They hadn't been able to secure someone for that role, and out of the blue I got a phone call to say would I be interested in doing that. And I took the opportunity because I thought here's an opportunity to take a step forward. And even when I accepted the role, I knew I didn't know anything terribly much about selling on the road as a sales rep, but if I relied upon those same skills, treat people well, follow up on what they ask you for, deliver on your promises, that you'd probably be all right. And there were lots of people around that I could ask for help. So I didn't need to have all the knowledge. I had the network established that I could call someone like yourself and say, Ryan, customer needs this thing. How can you help me? And we'd solve the problem together.
Yeah.
And that took me a long way. And I think that I had a lot of success in that role. I enjoyed living in that country town. I met my wife there in a pub on one Friday night. And we made that home for 5 years. And then, within that time, I became the assistant branch manager and the branch manager of that store. And that sort of started the momentum wheel, if you like, within that sort of first 4 or 5 years.
So it sounds like the opportunities have presented themselves, but it's been your commitment and dedication to stick by your word once you've committed to those roles and to go the extra mile to make sure you excel at them that's driven you up the ladder. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, as I say, I think I was a fairly competitive kind of person, and if I committed to something, then I was going to do the very best I possibly could in that role. So try to be the best version of myself that I could be every day, deliver on my commitments to whether it was the team or my boss or my customers or whomever it was. I guess my word is my honour, if you want to, whatever the saying is. But I was, that was important to me, and that I think that is really foundational stuff. But it can actually take you a fair way.
Yeah, absolutely. And even through those roles, we have good days and bad days, and we face challenges. Was there anything that kept you motivated throughout all of these different roles and career progressions?
Look, I think you just continue to learn. So every day was a new learning opportunity. So I enjoyed that. The job sizes and the complexity of the jobs over my career changed, and I had beyond the Roma experience, I had lots of different promotional steps in the organisation. So that kept me really energised and excited. And there were lots more good days than tough days, but of course, we all have our challenging days.
Yeah. So you're hungry for more, and it sounds like if we throw back to the horse racing, that competitive nature has spurred you forward throughout your career journey.
Yeah, I probably didn't realise that, Ryan, until even just recently, that how deep-seated that competitive streak is in me. It's not all about me, though. I've always enjoyed really what we achieve as a team. So I get as much enjoyment out of seeing the people I'm working with as a team succeeding. So, I was in racing, but I also played football and soccer and all sorts of sports, team-based sports. I think I'm that kind of person that likes to be part of a team that's achieving success.
Bit of everything.
And when you're in a Repco store, you're working with 5, 6, 10, 20 people, depending on the size of the store, and it takes a team effort to be successful.
Absolutely. Now, I've heard that you've always been thinking 2 or 3 roles ahead. How did that forward-thinking mindset assist you on your journey early on?
Look, it probably started out just a little bit organic, and it probably wasn't until I'd become the branch manager of the Roma branch that I started to think about the opportunities beyond branch management. I really admired a regional manager we had at the time and also the state sales manager we had at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really admired them as people, but also the job they did. It made me curious about what they did. And I started to think about, gee, could I be the state sales manager of Repco in Queensland one day, which was 2 or 3 steps ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't hard to work out that there were some obvious career steps I'd need to check off and be successful at in order to even be thought about for that kind of role. So I knew I'd need to relocate and run a bigger branch, that I'd probably need to become a regional manager. And if I was really good as a regional manager, I might become a state sales manager one day. So I started to talk to my regional manager about those things. And before sort of too much time passed, probably a year or 2 passed, I got the opportunity to relocate to Rockhampton, which was a big branch, had a full engine reconditioning shop. So again, ex-jockey, just worked out how to sell parts over a 4 or 5 year period. Now I'm running an engine reconditioning shop as well. So I had a steep learning curve, lots of hard knocks and experiences along the way, but that's where it started for me, starting to think ahead. And that then continued. I did end up becoming the state sales manager. I then thought, gee, I'd like to be the state manager. I thought that's where the cap was. I thought if you got to be state manager, that was it.
Okay.
And then it was that time, my boss at the time, Alan Shelley, who was a tremendous mentor and is still a friend of mine to this day. In fact, I've only spoken to him in the last couple of days, so I still speak to Alan regularly. He's well and truly retired now, but he's a good friend and mentor of mine, and he opened my eyes up to the world beyond state management, and that meant that I had to think about moving into state and doing some things differently. And that same mould of thinking ahead 2 or 3 steps continued for me, even when I made the move to Melbourne and whatnot. So, and it's just it was probably my ambition to try to strive to be that kind of leader or move myself into that kind of position and give it a red hot crack along the way.
What's your take on the importance of mentors along your career journey?
Look, I think it's really important. I mean, I've got business mentors today. I've got an external coach that I work with as well today.
So you still got mentors even in the role that you're in today.
Wow. Yeah. So I've got 2 people that I'd regard as mentors. I still regard Alan as a mentor. I mean, he's an absolute legend of our industry. He's a AA Hall of Famer. Mm. You don't get to that position by luck. He's obviously a good, smart businessman, and even in retirement, he's a great sounding board for me today. But besides that, I've got a professional coach I use to help mould my style as a leader. And I'm learning more about myself now as a leader than I probably have at any other point in time in my career.
Well, I guess they've already copped some of the cuts and bruises, and they can save you that, use that wisdom to help you accelerate your journey.
Yeah, I think what this person does for me is just helps me to step back from the day-to-day a little bit and think about the challenge or opportunity that I'm trying to deal with, maybe mould my leadership style in some particular way, and just gives me an external perspective. They're not involved in the business day to day, so they don't need to worry about what I'm necessarily dealing with in the business, but helping me as a leader evolve and grow.
Mindset and things like that. And so it sounds like From ground zero, from day one, you couldn't see that you're going to be where you are today. It sounds like that you've kind of built a rough map and had a direction, and you've taken the time to strategically plan, I need to go here and then here and then here, and had a good direction. So were there any tells really early in the track?
There's a funny story. In fact, my mother must have been going through a whole bunch of old photos recently and sent my sister and I a box full of old photos. And I didn't know this at the time, but I would have been about 10 years old, and I've got a photo of me in a billy cart behind a goat. And in the background, we're at a family barbecue, and in the background there was a Repco XD Falcon panel van there. And it turns out family friend was a sales rep for Repco. So I didn't plan from that point on. I didn't know about that until much later on. But I guess what I did decide, by the time I'd become the state manager of WA, I was living in WA, running SA in WA around the early 2000s. It was about that time that I thought, gee, you know what? One day I wouldn't mind being the boss of Repco. I wonder what it would take to actually run the show.
Yeah.
And there were lots more steps in between being a state manager and ultimately getting the CEO role in 2022. There were a lot more career steps, and they weren't all straight ahead. That's the other thing I think about careers is it's not all up and to the right. You just don't always go up the ladder. Sometimes you go sideways. Sometimes you even go back down a little bit for a while. It doesn't really matter as long as those steps you're taking are building out your skill set, your leadership style, you're learning, you're growing, and it's taking you on that ultimate journey to where you want to be.
There's valuable lessons along the way, and I think, you know, in hindsight, you can look back and say, I'm glad that happened for these reasons, but in the moment, you can't necessarily, you know,
100%.
How you think things are going to play out. It doesn't always map that, but there's always a reason for it.
100%. There was a time in probably the early 2000s, around 2005, I was the general manager of trade sales at Repco.
Mm-hmm.
And the business was going through a lot at the time. And my boss came to me and said, look, I'd really want to make a change, want to bring someone else into the trade role, but I'd really like you to go back into running a state. So for me, that felt like a step back.
Yeah.
And that was pretty hard to swallow for me at the time. But in hindsight, that guy did me the biggest favour of my career, because he got me back in it. I enjoyed the trade role and I learned a lot that I still take with me today. But going back into running a store network, working with branch managers, servicing our customers, gave me great satisfaction, and I really enjoyed that role, and I grew out of that role and that experience, and probably developed a bit more resilience, to be honest. That I took a bit of a knock to the ego, repositioned, did a great job, knocked it out of the park, and then got more promotions after that.
Excellent. Now, Wayne, was there a defining promotion or project that really changed the trajectory of where you were heading?
Yeah, there was probably two events that occurred right around 2000 and then again in about 2003. So the first one is I just moved to Melbourne. My wife and I, Sandy and I, had moved to Melbourne. We had a 1-year-old daughter. We just bought a house. We hadn't even moved into the house. And Peter Mummery was the CEO, managing director at the time. And he called me up the office and asked me to go to Perth to become the state manager. And I said no the first time because I just bought a house and 1-year-old child, and we hadn't established ourselves in Melbourne. We'd only been there 6 or 7 months. Anyway, a few months went by and Peter called me back and said, look, I really want you to go to Perth. And we had a good talk about it. And I accepted the role and then went home and tried to work out how to tell my wife that we're moving to Perth.
Dangerous.
So we did that. She's been incredibly supportive. So come back to that and talk about the importance of support and family in this. But we made the move. Anyway, 3 years later, a guy called Jeff Taylor was the CEO of Repco at the time, called me up and he said, look, this will probably never happen again in your career, but I'm coming to see you because I want to talk to you about 3 role opportunities. One of them was to go back to Queensland and do the job that I always wanted to do, which was to be the state manager, to step into the shoes of the great man Alan Shelley as he moved on to a different role. The other was to go to Sydney, and the third option was to go to Melbourne and be the state manager of Victoria and Tasmania. And that was a really difficult decision because I had the job on a plate in front of me that I always wanted. But my concern, and Sandy and I talked about it, was that if we moved back to Brisbane, the likelihood of ever moving again would be really tough. Young children, one on the ground, hoping to have a second child, and we thought if we go back to Brisbane, that'll be it.
It's a pivotal time.
Yeah, really key time. Anyway, we mulled it over for a day, only a day or two. And we had this house in Melbourne that we owned, well, paying off. The bank owned it. We were just paying it off. And we really enjoyed Melbourne, even though we hadn't lived there for long. And I knew that's where headquarters was. That's where support office was.
Yeah.
And that's where the runway was from a career point of view. So we made the decision to go there. We always knew that if that didn't work out, we could always go back to Queensland one day anyway. It didn't really limit going home one day. But we went back to Melbourne, and that's all she wrote. I've been there ever since.
And so you had 3 pathways in front of you. Did you ever have a fear of making the wrong call?
Not really, because I always lived by a rule that what's the worst thing that can happen in all of this? There's not really – the worst thing that happens is it doesn't work out. And what do I do then? I can always go home. So in all the moves I've ever made around the country, and I've had a fair few moves, I think I lived in 6 cities and 18 different roles, I've always gone into the role and, you know what, if this doesn't work out, I can always pivot and do something else, or I can go home. So I've never that sort of never held me back. One
of the things I've heard a few times is that the worst choice is not to make a choice. It's to stay stagnant.
Yeah, well, it's another spin on that is John Moller, who has just retired from being our chairman. He was a big influencer in my career over the last sort of 10 years or 15 years. He said to me once, the worst decision is no decision.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is get, caught and not make a decision. At least make a decision and then get after that, and you can always pivot and adjust later on.
I tend to say that for a lot of the young people that will be watching this, that are kind of, they might be leaving high school and they're kind of faced with the daunting decision of what do I have to be, what am I going to be, and I don't want to make the wrong choice, but your identity isn't tied to whatever you pick, and you can always adjust course later down the track, right?
Correct, 100%. Yep. You always learn and adapt. It doesn't matter whether it's in your personal life or in business, writing a business strategy. You're trying to write a multi-year business plan. Well, you're doing it with the information you've got at hand at the time. Try and make choices around which way are we going to go, and you're making a prediction on what's going to happen. And sometimes it works out perfectly and other times it doesn't. Well, all you do is you just learn from that experience and you adapt.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
What a hell of a journey.
It's been exciting and it's been a lot of fun. Not all plain sailing, but it's been a lot of fun and tremendous amount of learning. And it's still, as I said to you before, I'm still learning today.
It puts me in mind of that saying, a smooth sea never made a skillful sailor, right? It takes the challenges.
Yeah, you got to ride the waves, that's for sure.
That's it. Now, I've heard you described as a humble leader that sets a strong vision and lifts up the people that are around you. Even your boss, Rob Cameron, describes you as a bloody good bloke. Now, tell me about your approach to leadership.
You might have been pumping me up a little bit when he said that.
Maybe just a little bit.
Maybe just a bit. Look, no, I just try to be really authentic. I try to keep it real and remain really grounded. I've never forgotten where I come from, and that's important to me. So that humility, that element it sort of rings true for me. I'm a big believer in doing what you say you'll do and being reliable and consistent. And then, it builds trust and credibility and people believe in you in that respect. I've got a pretty strong work ethic, but I've probably learning and continuing to learn over time that you've got to balance that as well. You've got to look after yourself and set the right pace for the organisation, but be a good role model as well for the team. So there's some of the fundamentals for me that are important from a leadership point of view.
So some people, I guess they think that they've got to carry a certain persona and act a certain way. That's not necessarily who they are, but they've got this belief they've got to put this on to get the promotion. Do you believe in that, in being your true, authentic self, or that it's necessary to portray yourself in a certain light?
No, I personally just try to be myself.
Yeah.
I don't try and showboat things terribly much at all. That's not me. If I'm speaking about something, I'll just give my honest opinion on it. And, I guess I've been around the game for enough time now and exposed to the industry over a long period of time that I've got a pretty good read on the industry. But I don't regard myself as an absolute expert at all. I've got a pretty fair idea of what's going on around the place, but I'm always relying on other people for inputs and advice and support and try and use the collective team effort or those around me to make the right decisions. And
You've got to be a perpetual learner, don't you? And as the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know.
Correct. And I think just on that point, I mean, there was a time in my career when I was striving for a particular position, and John Moller had been just joined us around 2007, 2008, and John had come in to really turn around Repco, and he needed to build a really strong, capable, talented leadership team with him to do that. And I spoke to him about a role, and he said, "Look, mate, you know, you're not ready for that role, and I really need to have someone in that role tomorrow that can perform on day one, and you don't necessarily have all of the skills required for that role." And again, that was another one of those times when the ego took a bit of a knock for me, because I thought I was ready, but I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mm.
And John said to me, "Listen, what I want you to do, I'd really like you to go and get some academic training and support." So he suggested getting involved in a graduate diploma or an MBA. And I resisted that. I put it off for 2 years, and then finally I did it. And it was a 6-year commitment. I completed the MBA, and it was probably one of the most important things I've done.
Why did you resist it?
Oh, just because I thought I knew enough to do the job. You know, I had it in my head that I didn't need to do that I didn't have time. It was going to use up more of my own personal time. I was in a busy role. I was in a general management role at the time. So I thought I was too busy for it, and I knew enough, and I didn't need to do the MBA. So it's probably been a bit pig-headed at the time. It's probably a bit harsh way to describe it, but, you know, perhaps that's how I was feeling.
Maybe a bit arrogant,
not arrogant. I just probably felt like I knew enough to do the role, but then I didn't realise until I started to get into the MBA that I had a fair amount of practical experience, but there was a lot of other things to add to my toolkit with that academic training. And even today, I mean, I don't pull the textbooks out and go and research something, but when I've got a problem or an opportunity, I often reflect on the learning from the MBA experience and still draw on that toolkit today. So I've got a lot to thank John for, in terms of he sponsored, the business sponsored me through the MBA. He allowed me the time to do, you know, in work hours when I needed to go off to training and whatnot. But there was lots of weekends for 6 years in a row, nights and weekends, that I had to dedicate to that.
Wow.
But it was a really valuable experience.
It was worth the investment. Now, one of the things that you mentioned before is that I never forgot where I came from, right? So back to your roots. Are there any, is there anything that you learned back in those early days in terms of guiding principles or ways that you carry yourself that you still apply today?
Yeah, there is. So from when I wanted to become a professional jockey, my dad sat me down and said, "Look, even if you're not the best jockey in the world, you need to look the part. So you need to turn up looking the part." So I always try to present well in my, you know, appearance as best I can with this bloody face and whatnot I've got. But no, you know, dress appropriately, well groomed, turn up for work looking like you're ready for work. Basic things like that are important. I think the way that you communicate with people, like those riding days, I got to deal with all sorts of people, from rich and famous, really wealthy, self-made success stories that were able to be involved in racing, through the battler from the bush who just had one horse on his farm. I got to deal with all sorts of different people. So you have to learn to adapt your communication style to those different audiences. So that today still helps me. I mean, I love going into the branch network and talking to the team or talking to the customers and talking to them like they want to be, you know, spoken to. Or if I need to, I can be in the boardroom or at a AAA event and present to an audience. And that's just, I guess, skills I've learnt over the years, but adapting that style. You can't just be, you know, one version of yourself and apply it everywhere. You've got to adapt.
And that's a good point. It's not putting on a persona. It's just right message for the right audience.
Correct.
Right. And the thing is, a lot of the things you've mentioned, you know, looking the part, being ready for work, you know, a few of those things, they sound so simple, but they go such a long way, don't they?
100%. I mean, it's, you know, whether it's getting to work a few minutes early so you're ready to go for your boss. At the end of the day, you know, your boss or the business that you're working for is providing you with an income, and you owe it to them to turn up and present yourself well and do the best you can every day, so they're getting a return on their investment. And I think that applies to any role in any organisation anywhere in the world.
And your boss, your employer notices that as well.
100%. And if you do the right thing, you don't have to do terribly much to stand out from the pack either.
Yeah, not many people try that hard.
Small things can
No.
go a long way. So being presentable, treating customers really well, doing what you say you're going to do, delivering value for your employer, going the extra mile with some training, whether that's business training, your own personal training. All those things are 1%ers that can help you stand out from the pack.
Write those down, guys. Keep it in your back pocket, everyone who's listening.
Very simple things you can do to stand out from the pack.
We're going to continue this chat with Wayne Bryant in part 2. Tune in to see more. If this story inspired you or someone you know to consider a career in automotive, head to gearup.careers to explore real pathways, job opportunities, and more stories from across the industry. And if you're already in the industry, share this episode and help us show the next generation what's possible.